Hello and welcome to the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We will, as always, start with a story.
So, have you ever been co-working or had a co-working session? Up here on the Northern Plains, it can get pretty interesting on my homestead. So we had a week with really cold temperatures. The wind chills were down to almost -50. And my poor chickens just couldn't handle it. A couple of them, their feet froze. So what does any good chicken farmer do? They take the chicken and they bring them someplace warm. And the best place to put them was in my office. So for one day, I was co-working with two of my hens. And that can be kind of interesting because they make some sounds. I still had my client calls. I still had my networking. And I guess it was a bit of a conversation piece, but I didn't know if I wanted to actually let people know that I had chickens in my office until I met with one client and I was trying to ignore the rattle and the clucking that they were making. And she said, "Do you have construction going on next to you?" And I said, "No, because nobody lives next to me. What I have is a hen with frozen feet right at my feet in a cage." And so I sent her a picture. And that just kind of summarizes my life here because I'm running a business and running a homestead. And sometimes that means that the two overlap and life gets a little bit interesting. So thankfully, the hen's feet unfroze and she was better. And she stayed with me for a few days until my allergies just couldn't handle the hay and the straw being in my office anymore. And then she went back to her sisters in the coop.
Wow. There is so much to explore, and we will in a second. But firstly, thank you so much, Jennifer. I really can't wait to find out more about you. I had not scripted this bit. I can't wait to find out more about your hens and this story. But before we do that, let's have a quick introduction to the podcast.
You're listening to Storytelling with Puck, the podcast designed to show the power of stories in life and in business. Stories connect us on a deeper level, which is why we'll be sharing, chatting about, and feeling the impact they have on every one of us. Your host, Stefano, is the founder of Puck Creations, and we work with your business to define a clear, consistent, relevant brand which stands out from the crowd. We use that brand to create content that makes your audience think, feel, and take action. Visit puckcreations.com to find out more.
Before you do that, let's get this strategy sorted. It's time to get visible online, and it's time to find out how our guest, Jennifer Elia, does exactly that. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Jennifer Elia from Secret to Visibility Online. I live on the Northern Plains of South Dakota, as I mentioned, and I help companies get visible online by strategically going through their marketing strategy and making sure that everything is working together instead of just spinning their wheels and not getting anywhere. So I help you educate your audience and what you offer, how they can get it, why they need it in their life, and set you up as an expert so that you create fans that want to follow you and want to promote you to their friends, which is the best marketing that you can have.
Word of mouth marketing, it's the oldest form of marketing, and as you say, the best form of marketing too. Yet so many people, so many businesses struggle to get anybody to talk about them unless they've done something really wrong. So
and not all good publicity is good publicity. So.
Exactly. Yeah, the old saying isn't necessarily true on that front. Mm-hmm. but how do you go about even starting what's the base point when someone comes to you to work out where they need to start even thinking about getting enough people to look at them, never mind talk about them?
Well, I think that generally what happens when we start businesses in the 21st century is that we know that we need to be online and we need to have different vehicles to market our business online. So we join LinkedIn, we start emailing, we follow what everybody is telling us to do. And we have all these different pieces that we're trying to manage, and it gets overwhelming because none of it was done strategically. and none of it is working together. So we go over and do email, and then we go over and do LinkedIn, and then it just feels like, how do we keep up with this? So generally people come in because they're frustrated. They're working really hard, but not really seeing results. And they're saying, I'm doing all the things, it's not working. And I can remember being in that position. So I've learned from experience and my marketing background of doing all the things isn't really what gets it done. But also they think that the problem is, like, let's say LinkedIn or Facebook, but really it is that strategy and that messaging. And it isn't about having a lot of people. It's about having a message that attracts people and creates those fans, and then growing that fan base. A lot of times people think I need 100,000 followers. Well, it would be great to have 100,000 followers, but the 100,000 followers doesn't actually translate into business. Those 100,000 followers still need to know what you offer, how to get it, and why they need it, or they're never going to invest in it. So it really is creating that messaging and that relationship, so that they know that they can trust you, and they understand what you do, and they see that you solve their problem and understand what they're going through.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, there's a few different elements that really popped out, but probably the key one that I think often gets misunderstood is people talk about digital marketing as if it's a completely separate idea to marketing, as if they're two completely different things. Now, what you just explained to me there is the reason that I would like to state that they're really not, because I think what you just explained to me there is what people who have worked in marketing, in established marketing, understand, is that marketing is all about understanding who you are, who you're speaking to, and what you can do for the people that you're trying to sell to. It's as simple as that. So, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to kind of, I guess, reword what you said.
Yes.
Am I right in saying that what you're doing with a lot of these customers is helping them to understand that when they hear about digital marketing, it's not about following the crowd and doing everything that everyone else is doing. It's about understanding who they are better. Yes.
And digital marketing as a vehicle, like, it's still marketing. And I think that that's what many of us have lost. We think, oh, well, it's not marketing. It's because it's technology. It's learning how to get around the Facebook algorithm, or it's learning how to get your open rate up on email. But still, it's still marketing. It's just a different vehicle. And yes, it's different than, let's say, print marketing or more traditional ways of marketing your business before the internet came. But I think that it's more powerful because it's so much more personal than those forms of marketing were. So you can really amplify what you were doing there in a way that you can build fans, that small companies can build fans and brand awareness in ways that they never could before, but really comes back to those good marketing practices. So you need to understand how the platforms work and how to write online and tell stories online, which is much different than, let's say, in a magazine. But it's still the same concept. It's just learning how to translate it into a new tool.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned something key there, and especially linked into what this podcast is all about. You talked about telling stories online.
Yes.
And the difference between telling stories online and telling stories in magazines, which I'd like to get into in a second. But before we go into that level of comparison, something I think you mentioned on your LinkedIn profile, and it's an old saying that content is king.
Yes.
What does that mean? Why is content king, and what do stories have to do with that?
Well, content, sometimes people think of content just in a specific box, like pushing out posts, or content is blog posts, or content is video, and then they get into arguing about which type of content it is. It really doesn't matter. Content is anything that educates your audience. And that will always be more important than really your image and branding, because you could have beautiful branding, but if people don't understand what you do, or how to get it, or what kind of problem you solve or what solutions you provide, then they're not going to buy into your company. And really, what I always tell people is that people don't buy products and solutions. I mean, people don't buy products and services. I'm sorry. People buy solutions from people they trust. So they're not really looking for the air fryer or the subscription or the coaching package. What they're looking for is what those things will do in their life. They have a problem or maybe a irritation or a desire, and they're looking for something that will fulfill that. And so the content, whether it be in magazines or in social media or in video, is what helps to share that with people. And when it comes down to it, there's so much that goes into digital marketing, like the website, and there's so many technical things that you can get involved in. But it's still all powered on words, is what I always say. Even if it's video, it's still powered on words. And Google still favors long form blog posts. And people say, why? Nobody has attention span. It's so much easier to watch a video. Well, it is, but the video can't necessarily provide all that information in a way that people can just skim through and get it. And so that information is still important because it shows that you are an expert, and it shares that expertise with people and gives them the information that they need to make an educated decision and to maybe get a quick win. So they realize, I could fix this, but I really need someone to help me with step 2, 3, and 4. And so that's why content will always be more important than the cold messaging, because if you're cold messaging, but you have nothing out there that says who you are and really sells you, people are looking at that, right? They're looking at reviews, they're checking out your website more now than ever. That is important because we have that, and now we've expected it. We expect that conversation to be created. And that's really what the content does. It starts a conversation.
That makes a lot of sense. It leads me actually to a question that lots of people ask us, which is, people say you need blogs, but then I speak to loads of people who write blogs and they don't get any reach. They hardly get anyone reading them. So what's the point of writing a blog? Now, again, that all depends on how good your SEO is and how much of an audience you have. And so you can increase that reach in many ways. But even if your reach is low, there's something which you said there which I completely agree with, which is that if you're individually selling to people, just having a blog on your website, just reaching one person who you're speaking to on an individual basis and saying, hey, if you want backup of who I am and what I do, read this. Yes. Would you agree that that's a big help, even if you're not great at SEO just yet, even if you haven't got a massive following, the content is still important for that reason?
It is, because it does create that relationship and that conversation. And on the other side of whatever you're doing is a person. So we think in numbers and statistics. Back to those 100,000 followers. Those 100,000 followers are 100,000 individuals. And if you cannot speak to them, or the majority of them, in what feels like a one-to-one conversation, then you're missing the point. They're going to click like, but they're never going to really follow you. They're not really following you. They're just putting up their hand that, yeah, I guess I'll follow you. But then they're staying where they are, and you're marching on thinking that you have this great band behind you, and you don't. You're all by yourself. So yes, SEO can be improved. The more that you create content, the more followers that you will get if you're having that conversation and you're making it interesting, and making them feel like you're speaking right to them, not the features and benefits type, but really speaking to what their experience and the questions that they have. One of the tools that I use with my clients is Ask the Public. And it's kind of a weird little app, but the thing that it gives you is all the questions that people are asking about a particular topic. Yeah. So instead of just, like doing that spaghetti marketing, where you're throwing things at the wall, you can see this is exactly what people are asking about this. So maybe I should answer those questions. And that's what people want. They want you to answer their questions. They don't want you to sell them.
Once again, I completely agree with that. And now, there is a question, though. So we're very much in agreement. I think we possibly will be for a lot of the podcasts we work in. Yes. We work in similar areas and come from similar backgrounds. But there's another question which I think people struggle with quite a lot, and we talk about on this podcast all the time, and as a business, we talk about all the time too. If everyone's answering questions, if everyone in your industry is answering similar questions, if you've all got the same niche, the same sector niche, which we maybe shouldn't go into today, that could become too much of take over the whole podcast. Yeah. But what do you do to make yourself stand out?
Well, yes. The one thing I always say is that there's a million people doing exactly what you do. So it's never going to be, sometimes people try to come up with a super unique title, to set them apart. But really, when you boil it down, they're doing the same thing that a million other people are doing. And the title doesn't change people wanting to work with you, right? These elaborate, like architect this or goddess that or whatever. They're fun to say, but they don't really do much for you in the long run. But people don't do it the same way that you do, and they don't have the same personality as you, and they don't have the same experience as you. And that's really what sets you apart, because yes, there's probably 10 million digital marketers, on LinkedIn. But what sets me apart is how I serve and the method that I use. And also like my values, like my integrity, which is a big thing for me, is having integrity and being of service to people. And not everybody can say that. So that's something that's unique to me. But also sharing those stories. Like, we've talked about stories with the Story podcast. One thing that some people follow me for is my stories about the animals. And I never planned on getting known for that. But, when you're looking for material and you want people to be able to relate to it, and you want people to be engaged and want to say, oh, what's she going to come up with next? It's hard to just keep, you have this message or this product, right? And after a while, you're like, what else can I say about it? Well, people don't want to just keep hearing about the product. They want to hear about you and your experiences and what you've gone through, and, some sort of intriguing analogy that you have to share. And that is everywhere. Sometimes people are like, well, my life isn't as interesting as yours. I'm like, everybody has an interesting life. Everybody has experiences every single day, whether it's going to like the corner Starbucks or, your pen exploding on your desk, or dealing with your dog, or whatever it is, right? There's something that has happened in your past, something that's happening in your day-to-day life that you can relate to what you do, because you chose what you're doing for a reason. There's a reason that you got there. There's a story behind how you got there. It's not like you just got dropped into this, right? We all have a gift. We all have a story. We all have a reason why we're doing it. And most of the time, that story is that we were our ideal client at some point, and we figured out how to make it work. And so we've gone through those struggles, and we have an element of their life in our life, so we can connect with them in that way. And I think that really our job is to entertain people, not entertain people in like a viral post, like I'm just going to post something that everybody's going to comment on and has nothing to do with what I'm doing, but entertain them in a way that they can see that humanity in you, because again, they buy from people that they trust. And so that's how you set yourself apart, because no one has the same life as you, and no one has exactly the same story as you. And so you need to be you. You don't need to be Russell Brunson. You need to be you. And I think that that's the biggest way we can set ourselves apart, because we do have so much more competition now than when it was just like local people, right? You may have been the only marketer in your county, or maybe there was two of them and you put up competing billboards or whatever, but now you're competing against the world. But it also gives you the opportunity to reach the world. So we have infinite opportunities along with that competition, and focusing on the positives of it is really where you're going to find your stride instead of worrying about people that are competing against you.
I said we were going to agree throughout most of the podcast, and we still are, at least to this point. If you can find something controversial to maybe we won't later. But if I can hypothesize a little bit, if I can say the word, you've talked around a few subjects, which again we focus on quite a lot of puck creations, and there's in my opinion, two of the kind of founding areas of making a business work, not just in marketing, but actually making a business work, come down to one word. And it's become a bit of a cliche now because it's of Simon Sinek, so it's the word why. And Simon Sinek has done his TED on it, and everyone then uses it, the golden circles and all of that kind of stuff with the word why. But it's cliched for a reason. He makes a really good point, and what you were describing then, I think, actually defines the why in a slightly better way than I think most people understand it, which is it's not just about why you do what you do, which is what most people focus in on. It's not just about why you get up in the morning. That's all important, and that helps you with your focus. It helps you. It also helps you to differentiate yourself, as you said. It then when you're sharing your stories, it helps you to share different stories because you're realizing, well, actually, this is who I am. More importantly, these are the bits of me that are relevant to the audience that I'm speaking to. So these are the bits that I'm going to put out there in public, because I think that is something to think about as well. But there's still the question then of the product or the service that you're selling. Even if people love you, why are they going to buy it from you? And I think you explained that quite well in your last comment, your last answer, that they have to actually have a reason to buy the product. What is it going to do for them? How is it going to make their lives better? How is it going to solve a problem? And I think personally, that's sometimes missing from people's delve into marketing. So I've got two questions off the back of that. One is a very simple one. Do you agree? And the second question is, what else is missing?
I do agree that often we don't focus on the why. Like I said, the features and benefits. If we focus on it can do this, it can do this, it can do this, and the more features and benefits you can come up with, you think it's better. But really, you lose people in that, because even though they want the features, really they want to know, like, why should I be spending this money on this? And it doesn't matter if they have a lot of money and a large budget, or they have a small budget and this is a major decision to spend this money. Every buying decision is an emotional decision. We think that just impulsive buyers, react with emotion, but all of us react with emotion. That's what makes us decide to do something, to invest in something, whether it's a service, a product, a subscription, whatever it is. And that why really does come down to emotion, because how am I going to feel after I buy this? What possibilities is going to create in my life that's going to free up my time, or give my family a better meal. That's why all those subscription services are so popular, with the food. And I don't know if they have those in Europe, but here we have all these subscription services where they send you a recipe and everything's portioned out and whatever, and you cook together as a family. All of that comes down to emotion, because really they're not buying the box of food, right? Or even the recipe. What they're buying is that experience and what that's going to do for their relationship, or for their family, or for their health. And that's an emotional part of it. And we forget about the emotions, or when marketing, we only focus on the negative emotions. Okay. So like the fear and the frustration and the problem and the gloom and the doom. And it's important to highlight that, because many times people don't know what their problem actually is. And sometimes you need to point it out to them. But if you stay there and you're always in the negative, there's nothing for them to look forward to, right? There's no why emotionally for them to get into that. So why would they buy from you, right? They want to see the sunny possibilities. They realize that things aren't working, like they're not happy, that something's broken, but they want that better day. And so I would say that. And the other thing that I see most often that's missing in marketing is just telling people what to do, right? We just expect people to know. And we say, I don't want to be pushy, and you don't need to be like, buy this, buy this, buy this. That is the worst way to market. That's not marketing, right? That's hard selling. Marketing is building the relationship. But once you've built the relationship, tell them, like, book this call here, buy this product here, sign up for my webinar here. Like, just lay it out for people, because we're so busy. We're so overstimulated. We're so consumed by all this noise. We don't want to have to think about it. And if you don't tell us, then we don't even know what you're offering. And I had a client that was basically his problem. Like, he had a great following. He's very dynamic. He's very charismatic. People love to read his posts, but it wasn't translating into business, right? And it should. I mean, like, from the outside, it's like, I have all these people that, I'm doing all the boxes. They're all checked off. And basically what I said to him was, you're not telling people what you want them to do. I mean, that was really all it was. And he didn't completely believe me. And then after 2 weeks, he came back and he's like, well, I don't like following rules. So I didn't completely follow your plan, but just following your plan a couple of days, I got 4 people on my calendar and I got 2 new clients. And I said, see, you just need to tell them, send me a direct message so we can talk. And then they know how to get in touch with you. I mean, it was just a very simple tweak that he paid me a good amount of money to figure out for him. But it really is that asking.
The thing is,
right?
though, it's a simple tweak, because the way you explained that, I think, is quite funny, that he paid you a good amount of money to figure out. But what he's paying you for is your year's worth of experience there, because it's a simple tweak that you and I might know and might see very quickly, but most people won't, because most people have either just they don't see it, they just don't realize that it's important, or they have a huge fear of wanting to, as you said, it feels scary because they feel like they're pressure selling. And as you said, there's a very big difference between pressure selling and between simply asking. Those are not the same thing at all. Just to follow up as well on your first point, I think there's also a difference as well between people's understanding of what a benefit is and what a benefit actually is, because when people talk about features and benefits, they often talk about them as if they're the same thing. And actually the benefit to me is the solution, is the bit that plays to the emotion. So we do exercises on this with our clients. So we find a product and we try and keep it away from their industry so that they're not too caught up in it. So just something completely random. And we go through, well, what is the actual feature that you can say on this mug, for example? And you say, okay, it's the handle of the mug. And then you say, okay, that's fair enough. It's the handle of the mug. But if you ask them the benefit, they'll say, I don't know, you can pick it up using the handle. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess that is the benefit. But then you're like, but what? Go a bit deeper. Like, what does it actually do for you to have a handle? And it's like, well, it stops you from burning your hands on a hot drink. It's like it allows you to actually drink the drink. It's it's all of these different things. And there's the advantage which comes in the middle. But again, we haven't got time to go into all of it today. But I don't know what if you find this at all when you're talking to clients, that they often get confused between what the features, advantages and benefits. And again, this is all jargon, really. But I guess the areas that they need to speak about with their clients are the features, advantages and benefits. But do they have a clue what they are?
Yes. Yeah. And really the nitty gritty features and benefits that they get into, like it's in branded colors, or it's not really what people need to hear. I say when people are buying bread machines, because I just bought a new bread machine, they narrow it down to a few models, and then they look at the features and benefits of, oh, this one has 15 settings and this one has 17 settings, and that's when you compare that. But when you're starting with people, you're at the top, right? You're at the, do I need a bread machine? Why do I need a bread machine? What will a bread machine do in my life, right?
Yeah.
But you're going down to the bottom. If you think of like Amazon, you're going all the way down to the bottom of the page where they have the 3 different bread machines and they have the little checklist of what they have in common or don't. And we need to reverse that, because we need to start with, why do I need this? And what's it going to do for me? And really, in the end, that's what people want to know. Like, what's in it for me, right? We joke about that, but really, that's what it comes down to. What's in it for me? People don't really, I mean, they want to know that it worked for other people, or they want to know that it's quality, but that it worked for you or that it worked for somebody else isn't really what makes that change or makes that decision to say buy. What makes it is knowing that what it's going to do for me. And so that is really important, that we get stuck in the weeds. And I see this a lot with, like, especially tech companies or AI or applications or, that they're like, well, I said, I don't understand what, I'll go to their website and I'm like, I don't understand who you serve, how you serve them, or why they should buy this. And they're like, well, it's all right there. And I said, well, yes, it says, the tech specs and, what platforms it works on or how fast it works. Or, I'm not a tech person, so I can't even come up with the jargon from it. But looking at it, I know enough to be dangerous. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't mean anything to me, though, even though I've bought apps or I've bought software. And so I know kind of what to look for if it's right for me. That's not why I bought it. I had something that needed to be solved. And then I got asked for recommendations and looked at all of them and decided which one served me best. But it really was the customer experience that converted me, not all those little jargons at the bottom, unless there was a huge discrepancy, like we're 100 times faster and, you've narrowed it down to 3. But again, that's the bottom of the page stuff. You need to start at the top. And we're doing things backwards a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever gone to it. I am fairly technical, and I've gone into tech shops to buy computers for family and friends in the past, and they get asked all these questions, the similar kind of things that you say I put on websites at the moment. So, what specs do you want? What processor do you need? All of this kind of stuff, and they just look lost, and they just say, "Well, I just want something that I can do video calls on, complete my homework, or my works, do some work at home, and something which I can play solitaire on." I mean, to be fair, I haven't bought tech for a while with family, but you're like, oh, okay. So basically, you need a product that can do all of those things, right? Okay, now here's the selection of products can do all of those things. But then there's the question of, well, because most products can do those things, because most people who are buying a laptop or a desktop don't actually need the high-spec laptops or desktops that are out on the market. What actually makes them different and what actually makes them stand out? And this is where what you were just saying, I think, really comes into play. And sometimes it can be as simple as the branding, sometimes it can be as simple as the color, but other times it can be, well, actually, we've introduced this really nice tool, which means that you can be on a video call on Zoom at the same time as writing up a proposal for work, and at the same time as, I don't know, listening to a podcast. That might not work if you're on a video call, it's a bit rude. But but my point being that they say something which actually applies to the customer rather than just applies to them and their kind of almost excitable, understandably excitable journey of making the tech better than it currently is. That doesn't mean anything to customers. And I think you explained that really, really well. And so it's important that I think our listeners get an understanding of the fact that they need to make themselves stand out by speaking to the customer about what they need and why it's important to them. Yeah. Now, to take a couple of steps back, We were talking earlier about the importance of stories then to differentiate yourself and to build those relationships and to kind of get that rapport as a brand. And a long, long time ago now, it feels, I feel like I heard the clucking of a hen. And my question is, what do hens have to do with business?
Well, you would think that they have nothing to do with business.
Hang on. We're clucking around a bit too quickly here. Let's take a step back and remember the wonderful moments Jennifer Elia has already brought us. You're listening to the first episode in the third series of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. And we've already spoken about letting your secret out, becoming more visible, how to understand yourself better in order to market better, the importance of content, the necessity of stories, and so much more. You're about to find out why hens are so important in creating content, what an apple tree has to do with it, and also where you can find Jennifer so that she can make your business thrive. Talking with stories, making businesses thrive, and the art of persuasion. Here is Andrew.
We're all in the persuasion business, whether that's pitching to a potential client, selling ourselves in a job interview, or convincing a teenager to tidy their room. How we frame our message and how we deliver it makes all the difference, and this is the theme of my podcast, Leaning Forward. I'm Andrew Thorpe, I'm a speaker, a trainer and a storyteller, and I'd love you to tune in to our latest episode.
But there is so much of an overlap between like homesteading. So we raise animals. We have roughly 100 animals on here on this homestead. And I have a very, very large garden. And, you know, we have different things. We have a hay field and stuff. So different things going on. And you would think that I think we've been taught that the agricultural lifestyle is nothing like corporate America. You know, like they're two complete dichotomies, and we've moved past that. But in a lot of ways, it's the same thing, right? It all boils down to managing, how you manage things, how you deal with problems, you know, features, benefits, solutions, possibilities, planting seeds. I mean, gardening really is an analogy for anything that you're doing, you know, because tending and planting seeds and waiting for them to come up, that is marketing, right? It's not, marketing isn't you drop an apple seed in and you instantly have apples. No, an apple tree, first of all, if you put a seed, just so everybody knows, if you put an apple seed in the ground, you will get a tree, but it may not bear apples, and it won't bear the apple that you took the seed from, because apple trees that you plant aren't grown from seed, they're grafted. So it's a totally different process. So if you think, I'm going to take this apple, I'm going to put it in the ground, and then I'm going to have all these apples, like those YouTube videos where they're just like, take this seed, put it in, and then, oh, yeah. And it's like, yeah, that's 15 years later. You have this tree with all these apples. And I think that's what people sometimes think will happen, though. You know, they say, oh, I hear LinkedIn has, and LinkedIn does have great people. LinkedIn does have amazing possibilities, but it's not that you drop the seed in the ground and the next day you have 10 bushels of apples, right? You need to nurture it. You need to water it. You need to understand like what it needs, where you should plant it, when to prune it, when to fertilize it. Like all of those relate to business. And they relate to my life, because like that's what I'm doing in between doing Zoom calls, in between helping people with their SEO or their messaging or their marketing plan. I'm with animals or planning with animals or checking on them and just timing everything out. And so it really is that it gives me a vehicle that people can relate to. So I can start by talking about a hen or a pig or a goat or a rabbit. And I can turn that into, this is what you need to do in networking, and this is how you need to present yourself, or this is what you're doing wrong on LinkedIn. And it just draws them in. So I'm always looking for story ideas. And many times they just find me. Like most of the time, they just find me. I plan out an idea of what I'm talking about each week. And sometimes I even have posts generally laid out, but then something happens and I'm like, that's so much better of a story.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting that because it just, life is unexpected with animals and kids. So I just have to turn that into that post. It's I don't know. I love to tell stories. I always wanted to be a writer, but I've realized that that's how I can relate to my people. And there's some people that do that through video very well. That's why vlogs are so popular, because people want to hear these stories and relate to you, and they're learning something. There's some vlogs that we follow about homesteading, and it's fun to see like their animals and, like what happened and their kids. And that's what draws you in. But really what they're teaching you is like how to grow a garden, like how to process your milk, how to milk a cow, like all these things that you need to know. But it's that entertainment value that comes from actually experiencing their world.
So tell us your favorite homesteading story, or any story to do with your world, actually, that you you think links. It doesn't have to link to business at all, but just your favorite story.
Oh, my favorite story. Gosh, I have so many of them. I guess one of my favorite stories is like how we ended up here, because we weren't always farmers. We didn't always live on a homestead or in the Midwest. I always joke that our whole family lived our whole life in New Jersey until we didn't. So my husband and I grew up in the same town, and so did our kids. And we always wanted, my husband and I have been together for a very long time. Since we were young, we were friends, and then we started dating or whatever. And we always wanted to move somewhere. We always had this vision of what we wanted to do, but we never had the guts to do it, or it just wasn't right or whatever. And then finally, we reached a point where it was like, we just don't want to be here anymore. And we were heading there. And then, with the lockdowns and everything, it just kind of accelerated it. And it was like, yeah, that's definitely we need to find another place to go. So we spent a lot of time looking online and researching, and I interviewed so many people from every state, multiple people from different states, to find out what was good, what was bad. I read all the laws. I'm a researcher, so I just dove into everything. And people were like, well, what are the 3 things? I'm like, it wasn't 3. I had a list of 12 different things that I looked at. But when people finished their conversation with me about selling me on their state, whatever it was, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Utah, they'd always say, but I think you should move to South Dakota. And I was like, really? That was not even in the running on my list. I was trying to be open-minded. But and my husband had been offered a job here probably about 10 years ago. And again, we were looking to move somewhere. So whenever there were opportunities for a transfer, we always were like, where can we go? And they just weren't places that we wanted to be. But this came up and I was like, are you serious? Do you know how far that is? It's cold there. But I started to really consider that. I said to my husband at some point, I'm like, I think God's sending us to South Dakota, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. And the more that we looked at it, the more that we realized that this really was where we wanted to be. We just didn't know it. So we bought a house online, we hadn't been here, and packed up our family and our rabbit. We had a pet rabbit at the time, my fig tree, and some plants from my garden that I couldn't leave behind. It was very hard to leave my garden because I was very attached to it. So I had a tub of garden plants and my fig tree and a rabbit in my husband's little sedan. And then I had the big van with the kids and everything. And we drove out here 1,600 miles and showed up at a house that we moved into with no furniture or anything. We just basically showed up and rebuilt our life. And I have to say, when I first pulled up, I thought, what did I do? And I kept telling myself the worst that can happen is, we move again. We move back, we move someplace else. That's the worst case scenario. That's what I kept telling myself. That's what I kept telling everybody else. When I showed up, it was, I don't know. I expected it to be like this, wow, and it wasn't. But I got to the end of the first week and I said to my husband, I'm like, because he really pushed for this town where we are. This was not my first pick of the town, but he kept saying, this is, trust me. And I was like, okay, the house kind of fell into our lap and I'm like, okay, everything's lining up. We're just going to run with this. And we got to them the first week, and I was like, you know what? This is exactly where we always wanted to be. And so for me, it felt like we finally found home. You know, we always had this restlessness. And even though it took us 40 odd years to find it, we finally found where we wanted to be. And so sometimes I think I wish we did this 30 years ago, but we wouldn't have appreciated it the way we do now. And I don't know that we would have jumped into homesteading the way we did, but I always wanted chickens. And so that was one of the first things that we bought when we got here was chickens.
Amazing.
And it just exploded from there. And so we've been busy.
Amazing. So for our listeners who maybe don't know the difference, and I am possibly one of them. I've not been to New Jersey or South Dakota, but my understanding of both of these worlds is that New Jersey is geographically really small.
Yes.
And it's densely populated.
Yes.
Whereas South Dakota, correct me if I'm wrong, is massive.
Yes.
But it is quite sparsely populated. Is that an accurate depiction of the two states? And then what other big differences are there?
Well, yes, New Jersey is a smaller state. You can drive we were at the tippy top of the state, and you can drive down to the bottom of the state. Well, if there weren't traffic, you probably could do it in a little over 2 hours. But because of traffic, because there's so many people, it takes about 3.5 hours to go from the tippy top to the bottom. And those are like really outlying points. So the state is not that big, but there are a lot of people and there's traffic every place you go. And we were in a semi-rural area. So we had a mix of like farms and shopping plazas and, communities. So we weren't in the city. Everybody thinks that we were like in the big city, but we weren't. We actually got most of our produce and food and meat from farms. So we were in a farming community. It's just that it was very different than a farming community is here. And we were in the foothills of the Appalachians. So all the driving was up and down and hairpin turns and all these blind spots, heavily wooded. And so South Dakota, though, to drive from one end of the state to the other, again, at a very high rate of speed with no traffic, you could seriously drive from one side to the other, maybe see like 3 cars, takes about, I would say about 8 hours at 80 miles per hour. Whereas New Jersey, like even with the highest the speed goes is like 60 and you're lucky if you're going 45, because of the traffic. So, and you're surrounded by cars all the time. And we have, I think, 850,000 people in the whole state. So what most people would have in a city, we have in the entire state. So our town right here is 650 people. We're outside of town. And that's another big difference. Like in New Jersey, everything kind of spills into each other. Like there's the suburbs and the farms and the shopping plazas. And it's just like you just roll from one to the other. You never really know when you leave one town to start another unless they have a sign. Here, it's like there's a town and then you could drive for 45 minutes to 2 hours. And then there's another town. And in between it is all farmland. And so it's a very different setup between the two. And I think it's because there's less people, so there isn't that sprawl in between. So we didn't have a concept of that before we came here of, that it's either you're in town, like densely populated, or it's just wide open country and it could be 3 to 10 miles till your next neighbor. So yes, and we're on the plains of South Dakota, so it was very flat. In New Jersey, where we were, if you could see a quarter of a mile, it was considered like wide open, right? I don't even know that there was a place you could see a quarter of a mile. Let's say maybe an eighth of a mile. It was like, wow, it's so open. Here you can see 25, 50 miles, like straight. I mean, not that you could read a sign, but you can see down. There's a town that's like 45 minutes south of us, again at 70 miles an hour. And when they have thunderstorms, like we can see the thunderstorms. Or like when they have fireworks in 4th of July, you can see them in the distance. And it's quite a distance from us. That's
amazing.
So, yeah.
I imagine there's just a sense of peace in some ways, having that it's such a different lifestyle. And I know, as you say, you were in the countryside and on the farmland anyway, so maybe that's a big difference to people living in the city. But still, the way you've explained the two to me, and this would be hell for some people because they want to be, next to a shop that opens at 4 a.m. in the morning so they can get milk. But but for other people, and I imagine for yourself, it's just like the haven of peace, right?
Yes. And where we were in New Jersey, like I said, we were semi-rural, but we had, I think, 3/4 of an acre or something. And that was like, we have all this land. Whereas here now we have 11.5 acres and we have a very small lot. And my son said, 11.5 acres is really small in South Dakota. Like in New Jersey, that would have been like, wow, like how do they have all that land? Here I look around and I'm like, because, the people across from us have like 20,000 acres. It's wow. A big dichotomy. We're in a very odd spot that what we have doesn't really exist that much in this state. And so we're very blessed that we found this because it was like it was built just for us. So yes, it has been a bit of an adjustment. I mean, even though we weren't in this, city where everything's open all the time, here you have to get everything by 5 o'clock, things are closed, even in the big towns. And Saturday they may close by noon and Sunday they're closed all day. So it is a little bit of an adjustment to like remember like, oh no, like I need to go to the store, because we're used to grocery stores staying open until like 9 o'clock or so. And it's like, oh, I missed it. And now I need to wait till Monday, or we need to drive somewhere where maybe they're still open. But even in the city, like we'll go down to Sioux Falls, which is like 2.5 hours and things stay open later, but it's not late. It's like 6:30, and so
that's not late.
I'm in the city and we were doing something and I'm like, I'm going to stop at the grocery store. And I went over and I'm like, how are they closed? Like it's only 7:30, But it's just a different mentality of that. They just don't stay open. Like there's no reason to, like people can go and, but it's nice.
I guess the store owners get to live their lives too. And the workers get to live their lives too. And and again, that's not to say one way is right or one way is wrong.
Yes.
We have some similarities in the Netherlands. A lot of stores are closed on Sundays. Or they open for very short hours, and a lot of things close early. And just in comparison to the UK, where I'm from, there's a huge difference in the availability of things. And we're not in a small village or anything. We're in a decent size city. At least by Netherlands standards, not by the state standards. But yeah, things still close really early. And again, as you say, it's about getting the right mentality and being able to deal with and work with that. I want to do because we're coming close to the almost an hour, so I want to do a couple of things. Firstly, I want to create a little bit of an analogy of your story to business, because I think in some ways there was some good marketing going on, not necessarily by South Dakota themselves, but they have over time used their product as good marketing because they know their audience and other people around seem to know that you would be their audience, and this would be the perfect kind of fit for you. So I think there was some good content coming in from all of these other people. People were telling you things and you were seeing some good content around, and then eventually a combination of you selling to your husband and your husband selling to you was kind of that final call to action, buy now, to go into this right village. And so I think people often think their stories don't relate to business, but you can relate almost any story to business.
Yes, almost any story can relate to business, because business is people, right? It's people and it's life, and it's changing lives. No matter what you do, you're changing lives and you're changing the world for that person. And I think that's something that we need to remember, that no matter what we're doing, we're changing that person's world in some way. And we need to tell people about that. Like, how are we changing people's worlds, and really capitalize on that, right? Because that's the essence of what we do. Like, that will be our legacy. I really think about legacies a lot. And our legacy won't be that product that you sold. It will be how you changed their world, and that can impact generations. Even if it's something very simple, like the box of food that gets you to cook a meal with your family.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about that box of food. It's that experience that you created that now can impact generations, that we overlook. You know, we think it's a simple recipe, but it isn't.
No, it's true. I always remember there was a TV on in the UK when I was a kid called Ballykiss Angel every Sunday night, and every Sunday night we would watch Ballykiss Angel. We would have a toasted cheese sandwich. I think that was the time we were allowed a toasted cheese sandwich, and we would do that as a family, and that would be us getting together as a family. And I think what you just said then is if then you also have an association. So I have an association with an old TV program, and so they branded themselves well. But if you have an association with a product and that great feeling, even if you don't remember all of the details of the product, I don't really remember what happened in Ballykiss Angel. I just remember it being on. Yes. There's still that warm connection that you have because of the experience and the connection that you're having to that product. So beautifully expressed, and I think a really salient point for our listeners to take away when they're thinking about their own marketing. Now, there are a couple of things that I think people are going to have to look up about you that I wanted to ask you today, but I'm not sure we have the time. The first thing is, I think everyone needs to play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
I almost forgot about that post. Yeah.
I'll let you quickly explain what it's about in a second. And the second one is, I was going to ask you to do this here, but I think everyone needs to find, because it's a brilliant video, and it explains so much so well about LinkedIn. Your video on how much does it cost to be successful on LinkedIn. There's so many key points there. And I think if you want to do well on LinkedIn, well, firstly, just hire Jennifer. But if you don't, if you're not ready for that just yet, then at least watch her video on how much does it cost to be successful on LinkedIn. It will give you a lot of tips and a lot of useful information.
Thank you.
So, 2 things very quickly: explain what Kevin Bacon has to do with anything, and tell people where they can find you, please.
Okay, so Kevin Bacon, if you don't know, was well, he still is an actor in the US that was very popular in like the late 80s and the 90s. And Kevin Bacon was famous for, he was in so many movies, but he was never the person that you'd be like, oh, that's a Sean Connery movie, right? Or that's a Tom Cruise movie. Like, nobody ever said that's a Kevin Bacon movie. But he was in like almost every movie that was made. So there was a game called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. And basically what it was you would name 2 movies, and try to figure out how you would connect them. And you would connect them through Kevin Bacon, because he was connected to everybody, right? So you'd start with a Sean Connery movie and you'd connect it to like Top Gun, which Tom Cruise did, and try to see how few movies in between you could use to connect them. And I was never good at it because I can't remember names, or like, you know, I remember faces. I know faces, but I couldn't remember who was in what movie. Like, that just didn't matter to me. I remember the story and stuff. So that was always a big thing. So that's what I related to LinkedIn, because like, how many degrees of separation is there between you and the other people that you're working with? But yeah, it's an interesting game. I don't think people do it anymore. It was like something we played in the early 90s. He's
These
still
days,
around.
people would probably just type it into Google.
Probably. Google wasn't around. So we were there trying to like remember in our brains. Yes. And we did this all from memory, which is why I didn't, maybe if I had Google, I could have played it. It was all from memory of like, who was he with? What commercial was he on? So yeah, that's what 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon is. And the less degrees you could use, then you were the winner.
Perfect. Maybe people will start playing that game again now after they. Yes. Maybe they'll choose a different person though. Yes. Somebody similar to Kevin Bacon, but who's maybe kind of a little bit more modern, still around. But to be fair, Kevin Bacon has, I think, become famous in the UK because he does a lot of ads these days for everything.
Yes,
everywhere.
I'm sure he does. Yes.
Yeah.
He's in everything. He is.
He is in everything. He is in everything. So maybe it still works.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So where can people find you?
So the best place to find me is LinkedIn. It's Jennifer and Elia, and I'll give you the link. But you can also look me up on Scale My Business on LinkedIn. That's where I talk about all the ways that I can help you on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. We'll obviously put all of those on the show notes.
Yes.
And if you have any more places that you want people to find you, just let me know after the show.
Okay.
And we'll
Great.
add them on. But it has been such a pleasure. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners have too. And I've been thoroughly entertained. And I feel like I'm going to be clucking about later like a hen. So that's all there.
Well, thank you, Stefano. I'm so happy to be here.
It genuinely was a pleasure. So thank you so much for coming. We will, as always, finish the podcast with a story.
It was once said that Amanpreet had helped to heal the American actor Kevin Bacon. Amanpreet was indeed a healer. Her remedy wasn't that of modern science, but of something ancient. She looked at the whole body, how everything was connected, and how changes to lifestyle, certain herbal remedies and traditional treatments can improve your health and your life. Recently, Amanpreet visited her local doctor, Danish, in Mumbai. This wasn't hypocrisy, as some claimed. Amanpreet never criticised or contradicted modern medicine. Using ancient holistic techniques was supplementary. Danish was in favour of her techniques and sometimes sent people her way. Danish also understood the power of the right pharmaceutical. He studied at Harvard with Professor John Hume. John Hume had won every award known to the medical world. His research was pioneering. New techniques and facilities were named after him. His daughter, Martha, never got into medicine, but she often needed it to support her. Injuries were commonplace as a professional athlete. Martha played tennis. She had won 4 Grand Slams by the time she was 22, but she was prone to injuries. After her retirement, she moved to India, where she spent much of her life working with charities. Her work gained great notoriety, and a director named Michel Trudeau was desperate to make a film about it. He found a producer, brought in the world's best screenwriters, and cast an incredible ensemble. A friend of Michel and a patient of Amanpreet, Kevin Bacon, was recruited to play the role of John Hume. The film's original title was Hume's Heroics, but after a lot of consultation and confirmation that everything I have just read is completely fictional, everyone decided it was better to call the film 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You've just been listening to an episode of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. Your support keeps our podcast going, so please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. Subscribe to keep up to date with the latest episodes, and never forget the importance of sharing your stories.